Hello, my lovely sunwalkers. Somebody I thought was going to sit next to me on the table while I recorded this video decided she wanted to be in the spotlight too. Say hello, my lovely sunwalkers, to our eldest kitty, Molly Moo, and now, of course, she can't get comfortable, so she's going to go to the table. You probably will see this tail flick situation off and on again on occasion because she just decided sitting next to mommy is way better. Unfortunately, I'm not daddy. I don't hold her right. I have, as I call them, Barnes and Noble get in her way. And that's part of the problem. So she may want to jump back up in my lap for this. We may have to readjust. I'll try and edit around it accordingly. So with that long-winded explanation out of the way, welcome, my lovely sunwalkers, formally to another episode of Sitting Down with Soul Writer. Today's episode is going to focus on pronunciations of glossary terms for the Arsinoëphorus Alliance. I wasn't quite sure how to record this video for all of you, but I got some feedback saying that people would like to see more of me just chatting at you sometimes. So perhaps the format for this will be a little bit different from, say, Fiction in 5 in that manner if I'm just talking straight on to the camera at you a little more. You may hear fans and the air conditioning going on in the background. It is way too hot up here in Mountainside, Maryland's valley, so we're having quite the humidity wave. We've had some pretty nasty thunderstorms. There was talk of potentially more today, so I'm really trying to keep the cats cool, keep me cool, and not die sound-wise while I film this for you all. Thank you also lately for bearing with me on my sound and video issues. I'm still ironing out the process on many things and deciding which programs to go with in the future, so thank you for your support and for your patience greatly, my sunwalkers. Now, let's actually go ahead and get started on what we're going to talk about today. Welcome back again, my lovely sunwalkers. So like I mentioned earlier when I was rambling, we're going to do the pronunciations of glossary terms for my debut series, the Arsinoëphorus Alliance. Now, you've probably, just to start off with this pronunciation alone, heard me pronounce Arsinoë one of two ways. Give you a little context of who Arsinoë is. She is one of Cleopatra. Yes, as I keep saying, that Cleopatra's forgotten siblings. Actually, historians are finding that Cleopatra murdered, or rather had Mark Antony and their ilk murder Arsinoë for Cleopatra to become pharaoh. So she didn't just kill her brothers, Cleopatra also killed her sister. And you can hold on to that E with the umlaut or cut it short. So it's Arsinoë or Arsinoë. I've heard it both. I kind of go in between myself, and most of the characters in my head do. And now, mind you, most of my characters are, like one reviewer said, it's a melting pot. I've got, just giving you an example of Ian and his bloodbound siblings, which we'll talk about that term first probably. Just talking about them alone, you have Ian, he's from Scotland. You have Frey, he's from wine country France, so not the same part of France that Rochelle's from. She's from the north, he's a little bit further south-ish. And then also, of course, you have Bovary, he's from Switzerland area, and then Harumi's from all the way over in Japan. So even just those 4 siblings alone prove there's a melting pot of characters. There's 4. I have to keep in mind there's going to be a melting pot of pronunciations for these words. The ones I'm going to be giving today are the ones that I typically use. Not many have the dual pronunciations. Again, Arsinoë is or was a person, so I'm going based on a person's possible name pronunciation. And if you've ever attended a public school or taught in a public school, you know that you can have 5 girls spell the name Briana and say it 7 different ways. I'm sorry, Brianna. Yeah, I'm sorry. I grew up not as a Jenna I have a longer first name. I'll let you imagine which one of the Jen options it is. But I understand. I get it. Luckily, my name's pronounced the same way no matter how you spell it. I've seen it with a G and a J is what I'm telling you. Most people get it's not Jenna, it's Jenna. So I don't have that problem as much for me these days, but some of my students do. So I try to keep that in mind whenever I'm talking about characters and talking about these terms. So I will do a character name pronunciation guide to follow this video. That video will also cover probably the origin of their code names. It's going to be a little bit longer sitting down with Soulwriter. You guys are used to shorter videos in this playlist, so fair warning, this one might take a while. Let's go ahead and get my notes up here so that I can see what I'm telling y'all. And of course, if you do have a copy of book 1, Bound by Fate and Blood, please do pull it up and follow along. There is a new upload of book 1 in Amazon that does include the movement of the glossary to the front of the book, as I've been promising. I'm sorry I didn't get that out as soon as I had hoped, but it did happen. So, Glossary of Myrna and other common terms. First, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to dive straight into Adikos Neha. This is going to be the siblings in arms and merit who are bloodbound through ritual. I do go through this ritual in book 1. You see it when Ian, Frey, Vovery, and Hatomi become siblings. It's not just taking a sip of each other's blood. It's actually like a ceremonial thing you have to be nominated for. And there's rules about the nomination if you go through and read the full definition. I won't read the longer definitions, especially since some of them kind of repeat a little bit. So I'll try to give you the paraphrased version. As of book 2, we did get some newer terms. So when I updated the terms in book 1, I carried over the glossary from book 2. I'm going to try and remember to do that when I get up to book 5, to go back and update books 1 through 5 to have the same glossary terms. I don't foresee them changing much. Books 6 plus, yes. We are going to do a time jump, don't forget, between books 5 and 6, but that's another video. Anyway, so the second new term as of book 2 in the glossary, it may not be in some copies of book 1, is alza sos. It means husband. Another term for book 2 is antichasm. This is like the final entryway or checkpoint. Rochelle hates this word. It's kind of where the veil spell is hidden in front of the elders' major fortresses, rather. So you do kind of get to see through Ian's eyes a newbie's introduction to an antichasm without knowing that's where he had landed in the woods outside of Sancta Terra. But again, you find out very early on, chapter 1 of book 2 even, that Rochelle loathes this word. Araisos, or Arisos, I've heard characters in my head say it both ways, does not have a direct translation. But if you kind of notice, it connects to the term for husband that has the apostrophe SOS at the end. This is going to be a term we encounter in book 1. It does not have a direct translation. Common descriptors, by definition, do include equal, soulmate, or simply fated to be mated. I have a similar term tattooed on my wrist. I'm sorry, it's hard to see. In Gaelic or Gaelic, depending on if you're Irish or Scottish, respectively. This is their similar term. My husband and I have called each other Anamkara for years, and it just felt very fitting that this language needed something equivalent. And yes, if you're wondering, that is why by the end of book 1, a certain somebody calls his lass Anamkara. She calls him, the next term, Arayabib. This means eternal love. It is based more on modern Arabic than ancient Egyptian. When I go through and make some of my words, especially ones for Merna, I try to pay attention to some of the older languages, and I even delve into what we know about dead languages, because, well, technically Neftiri spoke Macedonian, which is a dead language. And that would have probably had an influence. The time period of the creation of the Alliance is going to be a spin-off series, knock on wood, eventually. So I do hope to go over some of these terms as far as their original creation and things of that nature, and give you a little bit more inner workings from how the characters relate to those terms. We've gone over the Arsinoëphorus Alliance, or the Arsinoëphorus Alliance, as far as pronunciation goes already, and a little bit of the history. So I'm going to skip that. And like I just said, you're going to eventually, I hope, if I keep writing, get a spin-off series that tells you the origin story. So we're going to skip down. There are not any terms with the letter B as in boy yet, so we're going straight to C's with changeling. Now this term does connect back to a couple of other terms throughout the text that we'll go over individually. But a changeling, a lot of us in fairy tale writing are very familiar with, because it does relate historically to what we think of the fae creatures, becoming like a changeling child, for example. And this term does play off that, but it also kind of focuses on when that character came to the Alliance. A Merna, who is a changeling, tends to live as a human a good chunk of their quote-unquote life, but they are genetically part Merna in some way. Might not be mom and dad are full-blown, and that's really less likely. They're more likely to be a halfling, and we'll get to that term eventually. But this is the case where you might have had somebody whose great-grandmother was half fae and didn't know it, okay? An example of a character who is a changeling in my stories would be Toos. He did not know, and has yet to share the full story. Baka gave me the highlights, but my Toos isn't his Toos, and that's okay, question mark. The next term is extremely derogatory. It's Chokya. It basically is the most profane insult you can say about specifically a female vampire, but it does get thrown around kind of loosely like other 4- and 5-letter slur words do today. The purpose of this term is to question specifically a female's worth and leadership in a largely matriarchal society. Coven or clan, this is going to be a house, quote unquote, or a network of homes working together as different sects of the Alliance's Council of Elders. Each clan or coven has an elder chair comprised chiefly of Merna, but it may also include allied humans as sunwalkers. So this would be an example of if you were working in close-knit with somebody, not necessarily for conquering anything, but maybe just for protection. You would have a human sit in as a representative of their kingdom. But at the same time, there's something I need to clarify a little bit. And in book 1, some people have noticed, wait a minute, there were 5 original seats, because there's 5 types: vampire, werewolf, fairy, dragonborn, we call them Dracokin as well, and then your cat shifters. And so there was 1 clan each, but there was a major split within the last couple 100 years or so. I think, I don't have the timelines nailed down because I haven't gotten that far in the story, unfortunately, but there was a split for the better on the vampire elder chair, so that's why you have Neftiri and Tempash serving as elders in book 1. Similarly, for the Fae, the Seelie chose their king, the light fairy, Arya, to be their elder, and the Unseelie, the dark Fae, split off and they chose Stachelisa based on her merit. She is known as the Winged Sister by code name. We'll get into this a little bit more, hopefully, in that video, specifically to mock Arya's lack of wings. He is the wingless king of the Fae and often mocked for it. Speaking of Draco, I mentioned them a moment go. These are the non-human immortals who may or may not have magically or otherwise heightened abilities. They do have dragon blood in their ancestry somewhere, but keep in mind, dragons do not exist anymore. The note I was given was they have not existed since, like before Christ. So they can't, these Dracokin cannot shift into a dragon. They seem like they levitate when they climb. They have a lot of weightless movement, kind of beyond what we think of a fairy or an elf. They do seem like they're gliding. They move very quickly. And as evidenced by Vovery in his archer ability, extremely keen eyesight, of course. And actually, Vovery's lineage as a Dracokin comes into play in Book 2 in some ways and causes almost a rift between him and Ian, his brothers. Read and find out when Book 2 comes out on September 6th. Anyway, so this is also another new term to Book 2, Duyun Krizoi. It's very hard to say. I hate it. It's a blend of Italian and Arabic. This is a life debt, kind of an eye for an eye policy almost. Essentially, if somebody does something to you or a family member that's completely and totally outrageous, you can seek equal compensation in a fair way. The repayment has to be reasonable. It can be negotiated to be lesser, but the person who was wronged is not always the person that gets to do the deed. For example, say your grandfather was unrightfully killed in a robbery incident. Your grandmother could step up and say, I would like my son, daughter, grandchild, whomever, to do blank in my place because I'm not physically capable. Another good example would be if, say, grandmom was visiting family in another country and the law wanted this taken care of like right now, she could nominate someone to do it in her place while she traveled to handle the funeral services and things like that. So there's some logic to it, why it kind of has to be that balanced situation. Rolling right along, I don't think I need to explain these people too much. I did hint at them a little bit ago. The Fae Merna, simply known as fairies or Fae. I do prefer the spelling I chose, Faerie, because of a specific author. Let me see if I can find the book. It's this author's fault that I chose that spelling. I've been reading Herbie Brennan since high school. I have the first 4 books in the Fairy Wars series. I love it. I've reread it a couple times since I've become a teacher. I've actually lent these books out of my own personal collection to students in the past, just because I saw that they preferred watching certain types of anime, TV shows, and whatnot, and just said, I know you don't like reading, but this is a quick read you might actually love. And I love his works because it has a little bit of everything you expect in a fantasy novel. So, but a good, fast, yummy read too. Fae, in my books, though, there is a note, cannot be turned. They are either changelings or halflings. You have to already genetically be part Fae. You cannot be turned. Keep that in mind. Sorry for a little quick slip in there. Coke, if you ever want to sponsor someone who drinks way too much of you for her own good, let me know. So, Gathrana. This is the sacred meeting space each elder maintains in their main fortress for holding gatherings, and that's not just with other elders, that's with diplomatic officials from the human world too. It's ironic. You see a comparison between 2 Gathranas in minute detail. I don't hammer it between books 1 and 2. But the one at Sancta Terra that we see in book 1 is grand, it's glorious. And the one at Amaranth, because it's so much further north and out of the way up in Sweden, where it's really cold, no one doesn't really want to visit for long, nor often. It's a smaller room. And therefore, you have the reason why you need the Gathrana, the gatherings. This is the meeting itself that takes place in the Gathrana. Normally, when it comes to running the government and making governmental decisions, the council has to vote. There's 2 different types of laws, and we'll go over them toward the end of this list because they begin with V's. But it requires a 2/3 majority to pass, specifically a Van Boon. So this is not a wholly monarchy-based council. Technically, the ruler, lead elder, is an elected title, not purely passed down from generation to generation. The choice behind why I chose the term gathering, it is actually a music reference. One of my favorite bands, as many of you have heard me say, is Delane. You can probably see my favorite lady vampire hanging on the wall back there behind me, actually. And for those of you who don't know, that lady vampire is, of course, Charlotte Wessels. I adore her so much. I've told the story before of how she recognized me as a writer because of my Control the Storm tattoo, which is another Delane song title, but I had to pay tribute to one of my favorite songs from the early days, and The Gathering is one of my favorite Delane songs, and just couldn't resist making a reference to that. So thank you, Delane, and thank you, Charlotte. The next term on the list is Gilded Governor or Gilded Governess. These are going to be the regional leaders of the Hunters Guild main enemy. So you have the Gilded Governess of the British Isles, for example. They'll oversee everything up in Britain. Another one will control Spain and France, and then another Germany and blah, blah, blah. You know, like they're trying to pair off larger kingdoms together and kind of manage them and oversee them in a hierarchical structure that mimics perhaps the way that the Roman armies operated. Molly Mill, thank you for putting your tail down. The next term, hobby or habby, I've heard it both ways. It means my beloved, and that's based on Arabic as well. Halflings, we've mentioned them before. No, I'm not talking about Lord of the Rings halflings. Sorry about that. I moved my carpet and didn't mean to. I'm not talking about Lord of the Rings halflings, of course. I'm talking about any Merna who is a combination of different Merna or even human racial types. For example, Mardigan. He is half fairy and half human. One parent was human, one parent was fairy. They're more likely to grow up in Fae society. I don't know all of Mardigan's backstory, but another side project of mine is writing a short story compilation called Arya and the Winged Ones, where you get a couple of origin stories for Arya and then each members of his Khanath as they currently exist, including somebody we meet in book 2 named Jira. She shows up the latter half of book 2 and no one wants her around, sadly. The next, yes, Miss Moo. Yes? Give me one moment. Sorry about that. I had a feeling Molly Moo was going to try and get her lunch a little early, and, well, she just got it half an hour early to keep me from interrupting me, basically. So, next term, that was a perfect split because we were going from our H's to our I's, and we are roughly about halfway through the alphabet, so let's keep rocking. The Ilihiphora are the divine forgotten gods of old. They're the ones who actually initiated the original alliance and gave them their power. The 5 gods, goddesses that are represented come from different cultures. You have Nephthys, who is Egyptian, Fenrir, I think I don't need to say that one, Artemis, same, Hecate, same, and Yelbenhin, same. So you kind of see we have a blend of different cultures here mixing in. Nephthys, of course, represents the vampires. Fenrir is for the werewolves. Artemis is going to be for your fae. Hecate is going to be for the cat shifters. And Yelbenhen, of course, for the dragonborn. The Imperial Lord Hunter is the ruler of all hunters. He's the head hunter, and it's gained by taking it and fighting for it sometimes. It's not always gained in the same merit-based honor way that a Merna can sometimes become elder, or most of the times become an elder. In a Merna are going to be your catkin, catfolk. They're also called tigerkin or tiger folk. At current, my cat shifters only turn into a domesticated form, such as a tabby, or a tabby, for example, would be Lee. Hotami is just simply a domestic short black hair kitty. I'm not 100% sure what Captain 5 is. I think he's a catkin. I don't know yet. I don't know if he's a fairy. I don't know if he's a cat. He isn't talking much, sadly. These catkin do not have to fight to tame their inner beasts. They do have a single person working in harmony type mode in their brain, and their magic does, of course, as I said, pull from Hecate. Jazzasos is going to be the opposite of Alzasos. It's going to mean wife. Now, I'm going to address this in book 3, but you don't have to be physically female to consider yourself a wife. Read book 3. That's Frey and Lee's story. If you're like many other people and falling madly in love with both of them, book 3 is the one you've been waiting for. Koi is biological brother. Koya is biological sister. You hear Abraxas and Neftiri call each other this a lot in book 1. Kuthim is the male elder equivalent. If you tack on Ra to the end, it means that they are related back to human royalty. Yes, playing off of the fact that the Egyptians believed their ruler was a reflection of Ra at one point. Creo or Creia is its loose translation is master or mistress, but master or mistress in what is the question? They're going to be like the historian. They're the record keeper. They're the head spell wielder. It's a position gained through merit and nomination alone, and you can be any one of the 5 species. Currently, Shimon, who is a half vampire, half fairy Merna, is serving as Creo Shimon. He is Neftiri's step-grandfather in some ways. He is Magdalira's second husband, Alzasos, or Araisos' soulmate. Magdalira, who is Arsinoë's firstborn daughter as a vampire, post accepting the contract with the goddess, of course. And Magdalira is Neftiri's grandmother, making Arsinoë Neftiri's great-grandmother. Neftiri's old, and so is Magdalira. Give them both a break. Lycan Myrna or Leakin Myrna, I've heard it pronounced both ways. That's, of course, your werewolves. I don't think I need to go over much here because we know so much about werewolves. They do have the needing to tame the beast aspect. They have to worry about the moon, and the catkins do not. But the song weavers have a melody they can sing to wind the wolves down. Thank you, Hulk and Black Widow, for that idea. I kid you not. Anyway, Ma Ren is a new term for book 2, literally translated to English as mother, but implies adoptive or foster status. You can use this regardless of gender. These days, when we get into modern time, I mean, but traditionally, even as far back as the 1600s, when books 1 through 5 take place, Ma Ren is normally given to female progenitors. That's going to change over time. In book 2, a certain turnling starts calling their progenitor this, and it's quite heart melting when it happens. Machioxalaxasis, say that 10 times fast, I dare you, means sunwalker. So all of you are technically Machioxalaxasis, according to the Alliance, and I simply refuse to make you say that, so we will continue to call you all our lovely sunwalkers. This is going to be any human, namely, who comes to the Alliance and wants to join up as an ally. You can have a couple of Merna who start off as a sunwalker, but then become full-blown Merna because of a changing or a turning. For example, that happens to Vovary. And he kind of expresses this, once you're a sunwalker, you're always a sunwalker. When he first meets Ian, you get that vibe from him. The other tag on to Machioxalaxasis is that it kind of works similarly to sanctuary for Christianity, and specifically with Catholicism. If you think traditionally back to how sanctuary worked, if you ran into a church and claimed sanctuary because somebody was legit hurting you, for example, this was one of the more common examples actually, a husband drunkenly beating his wife for no reason. And we kind of saw a take on sanctuary being used even in more modern times, as close as, the era of Hunchback of Notre Dame. It is very much something that you can still claim in parts of the world today. If you run into certain religious monasteries and scream, I need sanctuary because someone's trying to kill me, I bet you somebody would understand you need help, okay? So that is actually, spoiler, how Ian becomes a sunwalker. It's under a sanctuary status. Shh. Read book 1. Book 2 comes out in not even 10 days. It's less than 10 days. Come on. Master Militant. This is going to be the Alliance's leader of military efforts. So you have Creo Shimon, who oversees the magical stuff, and then you have Master Militant, who oversees actually the battle tactics, who's doing what to whom, when, where, and why kind of deal. Merit, I mentioned earlier. It's an honor-gaining system where Merna can earn respect and reputation through the types and deeds and actions they take. If I were to make the Alliance an actual tabletop RPG, Yubaka of ECG, if you're listening up, I'd love a co-writer. Anyway, this would be kind of your ranking system in that game. If you do 1 or 2 good deeds, depending on what they are, gets you a couple more points, and ranking up in that system gets you goodies. Mirhabi means my beloved prince. Believe that's what Stachylysa calls Abraxas, actually. Don't forget, Abraxas in human eyes would be a prince because his sister is his sister. Sabaic is a student, pupil, or ward, so it kind of exists on a continuum. This term gets used a lot in book 2, and you see where it applies different meanings between 2 different characters very quickly. I could not do a world that's sword and sorcery with vampires without including, unfortunately, the most dangerous magical attribute known, Senefskrai, blood magic. It's the only illegally known magical attribute according to the Alliance, because blood sacrifice is the catalyst. It risks suicide, and especially for vampires, it's dangerous because it risks bloodlust. You're literally draining your own blood to charge your magical spells. And blood magic is a major point of contention in a lot of different fantasy series. The one that automatically, for me, comes to mind, of course, is Dragon Age. The mages are often accused of abusing blood magic, if not magic in general, in that video game series. And that kind of gets hinted on as well for my Alliance characters. Our next term on the list is going to be Shallow Jiri. It is a teleportation spell that allows free movement between this reality, limbo, and eventually other planes. You can either travel there through the astral world or the abyssal world. As I'm writing book 3, I'm exploring more of the difference between the two with Frey and Neftiri. Chiffon is the female elder from a coven or clan who is married and is the lead elder. Chiffey is the unmarried equivalent. I did keep that genderized only because most languages that we have in this world, that remain in this world today, do. Of course, as with Kufim, adding ra to the end of chiffon or chiffey indicates ancestry going back to the human world. So technically, Magdalira's name through title is Uran Chiffon Ra Magdalira. Kalashjiri is the limbo existence specifically. It literally translates to mean to fade from all worlds. It's akin to being trapped in limbo, but for immortals, you earn the chance to come back and continue your immortal life. Time passage there sucks in comparison. You don't get to pick what version of limbo you get. It kind of goes into that phrasing of hell is what you make it. Frey finds that out the hard way. Read book 2. The Hunters Guild. This is the human-based organization intent on enslaving and slaying non-humans, especially immortals of the 5 types I listed earlier: vampire, werewolf, fairy, dragonkin, cat shifter, and any other type of Merna. There is a history joke that explains why there aren't unicorns anymore, and it lands right into one of my books. But the Hunters Guild originates from the days of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. So that's their end. They're the originators of the Hunters Guild. Turning is the process by which somebody becomes a Merna of certain types. So again, Fae cannot be turned. That's pure genetics. But the other types can be turned. Turnlings is going to be the related noun to those verbs. It was once used as a term between lovers, but now it has simply become a term of affection between a progenitor and the person that they turned, as a parent might a child. Might. Keyword might. Uran Shifei or Uran Shifan, and of course add Ra as appropriate. That's the head leader of the Alliance. It's traditionally a full-blooded female vampire whose birthright succession can be proven to go back to Pharaoh Arsinoe IV, the murdered sister of Cleopatra. A regent can, and you find out in book 1, has already had to have been chosen. A male can become regent if a preferable female is not available. This is a matriarchal society. The laws this society reach, we're down at the very, very bottom. I'm going to rearrange the last couple of terms alphabetically just so they make a little bit more sense. Van Buren is literally translated as provisions. It's the overruling laws for the Uran Shifei-ra or Uran Shifan-ra. So this is going to be what the president, the queen, the ruler sets forth as laws. And then you're going to have vamshia, which are decrees. This is going to be each individual coven house's laws. I'm from the United States. Of course, I would go that way, right? So think of the individual covens kind of like states, and then their elected royalty kind of like the federal government here. Or another good example I've seen is it's like the elected royalty is the principal, and the coven elders are the teachers in the classroom. Being a teacher myself, I love that analogy. You can see where all the pieces are working on the same things. The cogs in the machine kind of work together, but each section looks a little bit different. And if you look inside a clock, it's the same way. So that's why the split for the laws, because not always is there going to be a need to make a law from the head honcho for an incident that might only happen within one coven. For example, the vampires are the only ones who have to worry about handling bloodlust. The others have to worry about what it does to them, but they don't have to worry about what it does to a coven as a whole if bloodlust becomes a raging pandemic kind of thing. Speaking of vampires, them Merna, yes, I cheated, are going to be, of course, kind of like lichens or lichens. We know kind of what they are. They are severely allergic to daylight in most cases, unless they have mixed ancestry. And it's very, very rare to not be allergic. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, Nephthys is going to be their divinity. The final term, not to be held other than best for last, is Yara Kufim or Kufimra. This is going to be the Arisos, or the mate, the soulmate of their elected ruling, preferable female. Of course, those terms can switch if there is not a female who is preferable to be a regent and you pick a male as like a last attempt to keep the alliance together. Those terms could switch around, but normally the Yara Kufim is the consort, not the Chiffey or Chiffon. Well, not the Chiffon. She can't be Chiffey if she's mated. So, wow, that took us a hot minute to get through everything, but I absolutely hope you all enjoyed sitting down with Soul Writer today. I apologize for the interruptions of my absolutely wonderful Molly Moo. She's so goofy. And I do hope you decide to check out book 2 of the Arsinoëphorus Alliance, Bound by Oath and Heart. It does come out on September 6th. If you want to find out more information about that, check my Facebook, and please check my Instagram at Jenna the Soul Writer. I'm also still doing a special video for that day. I'm not doing a live stream that day, unfortunately. Some things have changed, but there's a lot of fun stuff going on in the background with me starting teaching full time as of Monday, full time Monday. I'm going to be recording a lot of videos this weekend, so I hope you enjoy everything you're seeing. And as always, I could not end this video without telling you something I should have reminded you every single step of the way. Please, my lovelies, take care of yourselves a little bit better each day. You're worth it. Love you all. Have a great day. Thank you for your support and take care. Bye.